Vintery, mintery, cuttery, corn, apple seed, and apple thorn, wire, briar, limberlock, 3 geese in a flock. One flew east, one flew west, one flew over the cuckoo's nest.
Hello, everybody. You are tuned into the Sleepless Cinematic Podcast, where we explore our shared love for watching and discussing movies, recorded in the late after-work hours, often in lieu of a good night's rest. I'm Emilio.
I'm Madeline.
And I'm Julian.
And the three of us are colleagues at a Midtown Manhattan music school. Music is what brings us together, but movies are what keep us together talking at the end of the night. So we've decided to create some order to our interest and record these conversations.
And so now, from this point forward, we're going to start categorizing our episodes. We've created some categories based on our different patterns of viewership. And we're going to have 5 different categories we go through. And this first one that we're doing tonight, we're calling it Viewunanimous.
Yeah, this is where we're going to revisit a movie the three of us have all seen before and see if our initial opinions still stand, or if they've changed, or if discussing the movie will make us change our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie we're going to talk about, if that nursery rhyme was not clear enough, is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Almost in unison.
Yes, I think very well-acclaimed, well-revered movie.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody want to start here and maybe kind of share a little bit about the first time you saw it and maybe how you felt about the film on that first viewing?
Well, for me, this was a movie. Part of why I was curious to revisit it is because it was a long time ago that I first saw it. It was like around 11 years ago that I first saw the movie. And I was not the viewer then that I am now. That was, in the grand scheme of things, that was in a period shortly before I really sort of honed my skills of viewership that I have in the time since. It wasn't very long before then, but it was far enough back in my life that I felt like if I revisit it now, I'm going to see a lot more than I did when I was 15.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this was a movie that it's been so long since I've seen it that I in some ways felt like I was watching it for the first time again, which was very cool because I felt like I was like surprised by points of the plot and actors that came up that I had forgotten were in this. Like, this is a movie that I feel like I don't have like a distinct, I watched it for the first time at this point. I think just my parents are big film lovers. We pretty much always had Turner Classic Movies playing in my house growing up. So this is just sort of a movie that was around, but it's not a movie that I've seen since I think I was a preteen, probably, or teenager.
I think I had a more specific, memorable first time watching it, which was I was a freshman at NYU, and I remember feeling like I had a bunch of blind spots in the films that I had seen up to that point. And one of them was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And so I remember I went to Bobst Library to the second floor, which is, I don't think it's where their media center is now, but it was on the second floor then. And I went and I checked it out, and I just watched it. And I remember, honestly, being a little underwhelmed by it. I didn't dislike this movie, and it's certainly a movie that I think is very much of its time, but it's not really one that it really resonates strongly with me as a great movie the way that I think it's remembered, I think, by a lot of film buffs.
I think that when you are introduced to a movie as being like one of the greatest of all time, it can induce a little bit of pressure as a viewer to kind of, when you're watching it, to look for those things that make it the best. And sometimes that kind of, it messes with your viewing. You kind of like, it sort of takes you away from this mindset where you're thinking, okay, just what do I think of this without any prior perceptions influencing yours.
Yeah, totally.
Because I love to be able to go into a movie like totally cold. Like I really try with new movies coming out to avoid reviews and like
Same.
not really talk to people about movies until after I've seen them because I don't want to have my opinions colored. But there are movies like this that it's impossible to not have some general sense of this being a revered movie. It's like Citizen Kane. Like you can't watch that for the first time and have no idea what people think of it.
Yeah. This is definitely one of those movies. I don't remember where it sits on the AFI Top 100. I should have looked that up, but
I can look that up.
Okay,
right now.
you go ahead and look that up. But it's up there. I'm going to say it's probably in the top 40.
It's
so
definitely high. It is 20.
20. Okay, so there you go.
I'm just curious what number 19 is.
Let me take a look at that.
Sorry.
Number 19. They did it in 1998 and 2007 with different ranks, but so the original 19 was Chinatown.
Oh,
another Jack Nicholson
Wow.
movie.
yeah, back-to-back years
number
too.
18. No, sorry.
And then the 19 in 2007 was On the Waterfront.
So wait,
was it 20 both times?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious
Was
too.
it 20 both times? No, it was 33 in 2007. It was 20 in 1998.
Ah, gotcha. So it got bumped back a little bit.
Well, a lot of movies came out in that time.
That's true.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know if 2007 maybe No Country for Old Men bumped it back.
Yeah.
Although I'm not looking to see if that's on the list right now.
Maybe There Will Be Blood, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe a dark horse Michael Clayton voter. I don't know. That's a great movie too.
Or Lord of the Rings.
There you go.
Titanic.
Ah, yes.
Good-
that's
yeah,
another
good
one.
point.
Yeah. I guess so. There are a lot of things that have come out since then, but still, in both times, top 40. So yeah, and you know, you make a really good point. I would also add, you know, on top of reviews and talking to people, I feel like trailers now. I don't
They
even
give
want to watch
so much away.
I don't even want to watch a trailer. I feel like it gives everything away when I see them.
So I've gotten in this habit recently for some reason of whenever I watch an older quote unquote movie, I will watch 3 trailers from that year before I watch the movie.
Wait, 3 trailers from that year?
From that year.
Any movie from that year?
Any movie from that year. I didn't do it with this
Oh.
because I watched this yesterday and
gotcha.
I was like, it's crunch time. I don't have time for this. But I've started doing this recently where if a movie comes out in 1975, then I will go look up trailers for 3 movies that came out in 1975. and
Wow.
watch those before I watch the movie. It just gets me like in the mood.
Oh, so it's like you were at the
Like
theater.
I'm at the theater.
Oh, okay.
I'm recreating a theater experience for myself.
I thought for a minute you were like trying to sort of get a general sense of what trailers at that time looked like.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
you're really trying to recreate being in a theater.
yeah,
experience
and
that.
for a while I was thinking like, what trailers do I think would have played at this movie specifically? I feel like that's too much thought for me to put into this.
I mean that would be. I think if you want to go all the way, I guess you do. But
my point though, bringing this up, was that looking at trailers from the 1970s and then watching trailers now, it's an incredibly different vibe.
yeah,
I feel
totally.
But yeah, I like to think now when I watch a trailer in the present that I can tell from the trailer whether the movie's going to be good or bad, and then occasionally one will come that stumps me, and those are the ones that really are interesting to me.
It's just such a bummer that the quality of the trailer now has to be some sort of litmus test for quality.
Oh yeah,
You know, hey, we are in rapidly changing times when it comes to media and media consumption. So we just got to be flexible, right, guys?
it's true.
All right.
Yeah.
But in terms of the general sort of context of this movie, I feel like this is a pretty interesting movie when you start digging in. You know, it started from a Ken Kesey novel from 1962 that was pretty well acclaimed upon its release. And it was right away spun into a play that Kirk Douglas starred in on Broadway. And he became obsessed with it and was like, I really want to option this into a movie. And apparently this was not a very common thing at the time.
Was the plan for him to star in it?
Yes. Well, I'm trying to remember exactly how old he was. He was probably in his mid 40s when he was performing it on Broadway. But
And
yeah.
that would have been like a decade before the movie comes out.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. When the movie was actually made, about a decade later, his son Michael Douglas was actually the one who stepped in as a producer. And apparently there was some father-son contention that Kirk Douglas, you know, movie star ego was like, dude, I still got it. And Michael Douglas is like, I'm so sorry you
Dad.
don't.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dad. We're gonna have to look to somebody else to play McMurphy. So yeah, that was a little bit of a sticking point between them, but I think they all got over it.
But it's interesting, just sort of on that topic. I mean, at the beginning, when they say that Mac is 38, my initial thought was, no way is Jack Nicholson 38 in this, but he is.
He is.
But I feel like 38 in 1975 looked very different than 38 does
Sure.
now.
Yeah, absolutely. He definitely. Jack Nicholson was not somebody who played younger very much. You know, he had kind of a weathered look already when he hit the scene.
Yeah.
But yeah, no. So I mean, this movie had been in production for a really long time, and I also remember reading that Kirk Douglas was actively looking for this movie to be produced in Europe, and that's actually what brought him to the guy who ended up directing it, Milos Forman.
Milos Forman began his career in Czechoslovakia as an upstart director of the Czechoslovak New Wave, as it's called. And he had made a few films at home there before. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was basically exiled from the country. Was he?
He wasn't actually. It was a self-exiling.
Self-exiling,
yeah.
yeah.
So the Czech New Wave was honestly a response to something that was happening in their society and their culture at the time. So when the Soviet Union took over Czechoslovakia, they imposed control over and censorship over the media, over the arts, over what was on television, what was in the news. And so a lot of what started to happen by the mid-60s was there was a little bit of a softening of the Soviet presence in Czechoslovakia. So what happened is the Czech people actually were allowed to elect their own sort of leader. And he was considered sort of the first secretary of the Communist Party there. And when this guy was elected and when he took office right away in January of 1968, he immediately softened a lot of the censorship. But apparently the Soviet Union did not like that. And so they had a very swift response, bringing a lot of that censorship back to the Czech people. And so what you're talking about in terms of the exile was the fact that there was this period of time where a lot of filmmakers in the Czech Republic were given a lot more rope to make movies that maybe had satire speaking directly towards some of their feelings about the government and some of the injustices that were happening in the country. And so Milos Forman was one of the people you had mentioned. You know, he had already made a bunch of movies by that time. He made a movie called Black Peter that's still very loved in the Czech Republic. Another one that's really famous and was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Feature in 1965 was Loves of a Blonde, which is also a very good movie. And then I think the movie he's best known for from that era was The Fireman's Ball.
Yeah.
Right. And that came out literally right before the Prague Spring took effect. So when all the censorship came back and just sort of shut the door on a lot of the artistic expression that was now suddenly starting to come out, Milos Forman was like, screw this. I don't want to live in a place where I'm going to be silenced or censored. And so he took his bags and came to the United States and was looking to work there. And Kirk Douglas was somebody who was very actively interested in working with him because he worked on very cheap budgets. That was one of the things he did. He also had a very gentle directing style in that he was not a very flashy director. He really loved allowing accidents to happen in front of the camera. The producers were interested in hiring a director that was going to allow the movie to have a very organic, lived-in feel. And they thought Milos Forman was going to be the guy for the job.
Yeah, and I would think that he was. I read that a part of what drew him to the story of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is that he was reminded of some of the totalitarianism he had experienced firsthand back home, that, you know, just seeing all of these scenes in a mental hospital, and the contention between the protagonist Randle McMurphy and the antagonist Nurse Ratched, that it felt personal for him in a way.
Yeah, totally. It was literally like a microcosm of what it was like to be growing up in the Soviet-ruled Czechoslovakia in the 50s and the 60s.
Yeah.
And so it was, in fact, I remember hearing something very similar, that he was having conversations with American filmmakers, and they're like, don't touch this movie. It's got a particularly American feel. And he's like, no, man, this movie is like my life.
That's what I'm looking for.
This is what I've lived through.
Yeah.
And so, I think that speaks to, some of the bigger themes that I'm sure we're going to get to.
Sure. And interestingly, I don't know if either of you two have this thought about his prominence as a director, but I feel like after I had already seen the movie for the first time, I definitely hadn't retained his name as the director. But I went through a period when I was just shortly before I was going to college, where like I really was just going down a deep rabbit hole of movie history. I was like thinking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Who directed that again? And the name Milos Forman, I think when you put this movie alongside a lot of its contemporaries of the 70s, whether it's Godfather or any, Scorsese movie, whatever it may be, I feel like Milos Forman is not a name, at least at that time, that rose up to quite the level of prominence as some of his contemporaries.
Yeah.
So I think like when I looked it up and saw that name at first, I was kind of like, who's that?
Even if you look at, I know we're going to get in some Oscar talk later, but even if you look at like the other directors just of this year alone, it's Foreman, Fellini, Kubrick, Lumet, and Altman.
There you go.
Which
Murderer's
is
Row right there.
Yeah, right. The craziest lineup.
Yeah. Those are all, I guess, they all have a case to be on a Mount Rushmore.
Yeah, that's the Mount Rushmore right there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think if you look at the totality of his career and you don't just focus on the 70s necessarily, you see somebody who actually has an incredible range.
Yes.
I mean, he has all those films, from his native Czechoslovakia, where I think he really cut his teeth and created his voice as a director. But then, he also directed Ragtime,
Hair,
Amadeus,
and then Amadeus, which is my favorite of the movies that he's done.
I haven't seen it yet, actually.
It's a really powerful movie, and that's just me. That's just me talking. But for me, that's my favorite of his movies. But then he also had a couple really big hits in the '90s.
Yeah.
The People versus Larry Flint, which is also a really good movie, and then Man on the Moon, which was the Andy Kaufman biopic that very famously Jim Carrey went super method on, but also was a really fascinating movie. So I mean, he's had a really, I think, a very storied career. Even if you remove Cuckoo's Nest and Amadeus, the two movies that he won an Academy Award for Best Director for.
Right.
So
and both won Best Picture too.
Yeah, totally. So
interestingly, I mean, he has a great filmography, but the only other movie of his that I've seen is Man on the Moon. And kind of a through line between that and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is one specific actor, Danny DeVito.
Who I gotta say I forgot was in this and did not recognize him until about halfway through.
Yeah,
I have a story related to that.
Yeah,
but Danny DeVito, I mean, he was shortly after One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. This movie was kind of his breakthrough.
Totally.
And shortly after that, he was cast in the TV sitcom Taxi.
Louis De Palma.
Yeah, that's right, Louis De Palma.
Yeah. Kind of a shyster, which I think is where he really that's a TV show where he really got his identity.
Yeah,
because this movie, like you said,
he's unrecognizable.
He's very young and he's so meek.
Yeah, he doesn't have a lot of lines. I mean, his character Martini is not the most eloquent as far as like his speech.
Yeah. But then that show Taxi is where the connection between Danny DeVito and Andy Kaufman emerges, because Andy Kaufman was on Taxi as the memorable character Latka Gravis. And then, of course, by the time Man on the Moon comes out in 1999, Andy Kaufman has long since passed away, and Danny DeVito is in Man on the Moon, not playing himself, but playing George Shapiro, who was he was basically the person who broke Andy Kaufman to the mainstream. But yeah, just the through lines here of Milos Forman and Danny DeVito, and then by proxy Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, Danny DeVito and Michael Douglas too. I did not know this before I started doing research for this, but they were roommates back in the '60s, and then obviously Danny DeVito is in Cuckoo's Nest, produced by Michael Douglas. And then in the 80s, Danny DeVito and Michael Douglas were like buddies on screen. Both of them were in Romancing the Stone. And then they also were in the sequel of that, Jewel of the Nile. And then, very famously, they were also in War of the Roses, which is another fantastic movie.
Haven't seen it.
That's super, super funny and very dark. But yeah.
Off of your story, Madeline, about not recognizing him at first, the first time I ever watched the movie with my parents all those years ago, that was what happened to us. And there was like a point, maybe like a little more than halfway through the movie, where I think we pointed to Martini and said to ourselves, like, if this movie were made later on in time, Danny DeVito would have played him. And then the credits rolled, and lo and behold, it was him.
Yeah. I mean, he's so young, though.
He's very
and
young.
it really does look like he aged like 15 years between 1975 and 1978 when Taxi started.
Mhm.
Taxi is when you actually see the Danny DeVito that you're going to get to know in the 80s, like Danny DeVito from Twins and Throw Mama from a Train and
even It's
Junior
Always
or
Sunny.
whatever, or It's Always Sunny or
Yeah.
War of the Roses or Romancing the Stone. Like
He
that
hits
character.
his niche
Yeah.
not long after this movie.
Apropos of It's Always Sunny, there actually is an episode of that show that lampoons One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Really?
I forget what it's called or what season it's in, but there was an episode where, Frank Reynolds, Danny DeVito's character, he has some kind of mishap with medication and gets institutionalized. And then there is a chief character in this episode of It's Always Sunny who, just like in the actual film, uses a sync mechanism to break open a window of this institution and release, well, not himself, but in the show, the Danny DeVito character, Frank Reynolds.
That's funny. I mean, very, very self-reflexive moment.
Yeah.
That's really very cool.
So it's kind of fitting that, as we start to really get into the thick of talking about the movie itself, that Danny DeVito comes up first because he was the first person to be cast in the movie.
Interesting.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Even
was-
before Nicholson.
I believe so. And he was in the original Broadway production.
Yeah.
That's why.
Same character. I
Same
assume.
character.
Yeah. And I know that Nicholson was attached to the project, but then he had some sort of a conflict. And so they had to push the production of the movie back 6 months.
Oh.
So Milos Forman, I know, was really insistent that they actually film in a mental institution.
Right.
He didn't want to be in a soundstage. I know that the book, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, was not particularly well liked in the mental health community at that
Interesting.
point. The production crew was looking for an appropriate setting, and they were able to find one in Salem, Oregon.
Mhm.
There was a mental institution there, and there was one gentleman, the guy who ran that, who oddly enough is in the movie. He plays the head psychiatrist, the one who caught a 32-pound fish, the one who
Ooh.
talks to Jack Nicholson in the beginning, kind of lays out for him his scenario.
And I think he's quite good in this. So that guy's not an actor.
He's not a trained actor.
I
no.
mean, I guess because he's just doing his job on camera, essentially.
Yeah, totally.
But I was like, ooh, who's that guy? And I never got a chance to look him up because I really enjoyed that opening scene. I think it's very effective because you sort of see that like he is trying to be sympathetic to Mac.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mhm.
I want to remember that later when we continue talking.
Yeah.
But yes, I totally agree. I thought he's very good in the movie, and that whole banter back and forth with the fish, which oddly enough foreshadows
Yeah, it
what
comes
happens
back.
later in the movie. He delivers it so nicely. He's like, oh yeah, oh no, not 40, 32 pounds or whatever. But not just him. There's an Indian doctor who in a later scene
Yeah.
also shows up. He's also he's not an actor. He's an actual doctor.
He's also great because I forget which scene exactly, but he has like kind of a little smirk that comes through at one point.
He does. He does.
After the sequence where McMurphy hijacks the fishing boat.
Right. They're kind of meeting about
yeah.
like, what are we going to do about this guy? He's
Totally.
trouble.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and that's when that doctor, like you see his face before, but he actually speaks there.
Yeah, 100%. The other thing that happened because they filmed in a mental institution is that they actually had inmates that were committed there on screen and were kind of shuffling around and were also part of the crew, which was really interesting. Some of them had skills in particular trades, and so they used them, which was really one of the thrusts of the gentleman who we just talked about, the head psychiatrist of that particular institution where they filmed. He wanted it to be an opportunity for the inmates to have to assume certain roles that they normally wouldn't have.
Wow.
He was a pretty progressive guy.
I read all of the actors who played inmates were assigned people to shadow as
Yeah,
well.
totally.
And that they spent, I think, a week there basically observing and living in the facility before actually filming the movie
Yeah.
in January 1975.
Yeah. And I also read too that some of them got very cozy with the place, got very comfortable with it. And some of them didn't even go back to their hotels to sleep.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
It's an interesting kind of methody type environment. But I know we talked a little earlier about the first times that we saw the movie. Do you remember, Julian, what you thought of the movie? Did you think it was a good movie when you first saw it?
Definitely, yeah.
Okay.
I think, because I was not as refined a viewer then as I am now, there was a level of insight that I didn't have in that initial assessment. But I remember just, it being a impactful story told very vividly, with an arc that I couldn't really predict, that I thought had a lot of interesting things to say, and that was kind of all there was to it. And I would agree with much of that initial assessment today. I did feel a little pressure from just that sense of, people really highly regard this movie. Am I going to agree? Do I
Sure.
And I think, by all metrics, in my opinion, it's a great movie.
Cool. What about you, Madeline? I know you said that you didn't have a specific memory of watching it, but was your overall impression thinking of the movie?
My impression was positive. And I feel like I have that experience with a lot of movies from my childhood that I can't really pinpoint specific times that I watch them, but I just have generally positive or negative impressions. And for this was generally positive. This was a movie that it's been a long time since I've seen, but I looked back on oh yeah, well, that's objectively a good movie. And it's now it's hard for me to even say that about any movie, and that objectivity in film or in art is doesn't really exist that much. So my opinion has evolved in that I rewatched this movie and I'm yes, I very much enjoyed seems like the wrong word, but I thought this was very well done. I think it was a very well told story with really great performances. And yeah, so I think I had positive feelings before that have been more solidified on rewatch.
Cool. I would say for myself personally, I think I liked it more this time. I still have some questions though that overall made me not give myself fully over to this movie and to the story. So this movie sort of pins the McMurphy character, played by Jack Nicholson, against the head nurse, Mildred Ratched, I think is her name.
Sounds right.
Yep, played by Louise Fletcher.
The movie in so many aspects is this very realistic, or going for realistic atmosphere, but then, to have this comically obvious villain name, Ratched.
I totally agree. Yeah.
It's a little on the nose.
Yeah.
It's very on the nose. I could not really get on board with the sort of duality that the movie was trying to create. And, one of the other questions I sort of found myself having as I watched the movie was, the Jack Nicholson character is objectively a criminal.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And he was convicted of statutory rape.
Yes.
Also.
Yeah. And I don't know if in the book or in the movie they're trying to maybe soften that in some ways.
And I mean, even in the movie, he tries to defend himself to the head psychiatrist of oh, she's 15 going on 35. And she told me she was 18.
Yeah.
And I'm rewatching this and I was so I hate him already.
Well, yeah. I mean, and I think that there's some very clear details that are brought out in his character that make him objectively a criminal, right? And so there's that going on that immediately is supposed to complicate him as some vessel for a greater message. Now, having Nurse Ratched played the way she is, I found it really confusing. I think that Louise Fletcher does an incredible job acting. Her eyes are so effective at honestly being whatever you want them to be. They could be warm, caring, calming. They could also be soulless and dead-eyed and maybe calculating or manipulative. It's kind of all there.
Yeah.
There's a read on her that I really was not able to pin down. Yeah. And so when they were trying to sort of create her as this villain and create this sort of duality of Jack Nicholson and her, I wasn't really sold on them as adversaries.
Yeah, there's like I think it's the scene that we were alluding to earlier after he goes on his little joyride when the head psychiatrist says something like, "Oh, well, the person he's closest with is the one he hates the most," and this kind of caught me off guard. Honestly, I was like,
this whole scene caught me off guard.
Yeah.
This is actually the scene I have the biggest problem with in the movie.
Yeah, and then she has the line about like because they're all sort of like he's got to go.
Yes.
And she's like, well, no.
Yeah.
That would be pushing our problems onto someone else.
That's the other thing that I can't figure out is she...
What is her motivation?
What is her motivation in this? She's not a good representative of the mental institution as a whole. She's not. She's like the dissenting vote in that room.
But she's also supposedly like their most highly regarded nerd.
Exactly. There's like motivations I just don't get because it did not feel clean enough for it to be black and white. And that's not necessarily what you need, but I really felt that what the movie's trying to set up is this sort of binary.
Oddly enough, I didn't really get that. I didn't necessarily watch this thinking they're trying to set up this binary because I think both of them are very complicated.
Yeah.
We were kind of asking earlier, and I think we wanted to get into like how much of a villain is she really? I mean, the movie comes out in 1975, but it's set in 1963.
Yeah.
She's a woman who is in this position of power over these men, but she has to be steely. Like she has to establish authority as part of her job, you know?
Yeah. Just about the time period, you have to look pretty carefully for the details that note that in the movie. Like the only point where I noticed the time period actively mentioned is there's a scene, I think like after one of the more sensational moments in the movie where you hear a television playing and it's reporting about the Alabama church bombing, which happened in 1963.
The difference between you and I is that I was like, well, it's the 1963 World Series.
Oh.
And I appreciate that you picked up on a
historical
tragedy. Event, a historical tragedy. Whereas I was like, ooh, who played in the 1975 World Series? And I was like, this doesn't seem right.
Talking a lot about Sandy Koufax.
Yeah.
You mentioned him a lot. It's like, oh, he's in
Mickey
trouble.
Mantle, yeah. And and as someone who is not knowledgeable about baseball, I mean, I would have missed that.
That went right over my head as well.
Yeah.
But speaking to that whole villain, anti-hero aspect of McMurphy and Nurse Ratched, that is the scene that really sets it up.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
I can't remember now. Does that scene happen before or after that conversation with the doctors?
I think it's before, right?
It's quite a bit before.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's quite
that
a
makes
bit
it even
before.
weirder to me.
Before he even hijacks the boat, I think.
Then that makes it even weirder because that's the scene where it really is set up that she's like, oh, this guy's really trouble.
Yeah, he's a bad influence.
So then why does she fight for him?
Yeah.
Is she trying to actively make his life miserable?
Well, there's a lot about the characters that a lot of questions that the movie doesn't really try to answer. It definitely leaves a certain amount of ambiguity in interpretation for a bunch of them, not just Nurse Ratched. I think on a certain level, it's true of McMurphy as well. I certainly think it's true of Chief. But I did, throughout the movie find myself wondering at times, is Nurse Ratched this villain who is an antagonist to this story's protagonist, but, objectively someone who is just kind of ordinary? There's one particular scene, which I'm sure we'll get to a little later, where I actually think that does kind of qualify her as a villain. There's one particularly antagonistic thing that she does that just had me squirming when I watched it.
Yeah. Is it the Billy Bibbit?
Yes.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
holding the mom over him?
Yeah.
So that's like the big kind of villain moment that she has.
I feel like it violates HIPAA in our current society.
Yeah,
for sure.
One possible interpretation is maybe that McMurphy kind of gives her work to do, that, he makes her job a little more interesting. I was thinking while watching her, just in talking about the restraint of the role in that sort of stone cold expression, one not cinematic but television role that came to mind thinking of her was Dr. Melfi on The Sopranos, who is also, played with incredible restraint by Lorraine Bracco. And a key element of that character, without getting into too many specifics, is that she has kind of a sick fascination with the world of Tony Soprano. And that's why, they continue to meet in the way that they do. That she gets kind of a vicarious thrill from hearing about his life.
Speaking of television, have any of us watched any of the Nurse Ratched television show?
I haven't, but I like Sarah Paulson a lot.
I like Sarah Paulson, but
Yeah, I like her too.
I haven't watched any of the show. One detail that stood out to me as I was looking into this is that part of her backstory in that movie is that she was a nurse in a war. Timing wise, I don't know if it would have been World War II or like
Korean
Korea.
War, maybe. Yeah.
But she apparently was euthanizing soldiers. So that's like the one thing that jumped out at me that I was like, okay, so they are trying to make her into a supervillain.
Yeah.
With this backstory.
Well, that was the other thing too, and we were talking about our preconceived notions before we come into the movie. The AFI has even been like 100.
She's on the top 100 villains.
She's on the 100 top villains.
She is,
and so
she's pretty high up too.
Exactly. I mean, she has those moments, but it seems like they are designed for the narrative to go to that place where Jack Nicholson just has to break. I just didn't feel it on a strong enough level that she was a good representation of the type of censoring presence that the story is really trying to be referenced to.
And another important detail about her, and I think I spent most of the movie thinking this when reading into her, is that she really is just acting on behalf of the system that she's a part of. She is an underling at this institution. She's not,
but she isn't. That scene in that movie completely
the
takes that
scene
out of
where
it.
she
overrides everybody.
It's true.
Yeah, for him to stay.
Yeah.
I feel like there are certain professions, and I think nursing is one. I think teaching is some ways and another, where you just sometimes have to be a bitch. Like you have to present yourself and stand firm and steel yourself. I have a background teaching in the school system with classrooms of 60 12-year-olds, and I'm sure that I did and said plenty of things that made me a villain to them. And I think that in this kind of nursing or working in a mental institution, you have to set these boundaries.
And I think that's the thing too that makes it hard for me to see her as this villain,
because goes
she's
home
really
and
doing
has
her
a
job.
life. She has supposedly friends because she's friends with Billy's mom.
Yeah. Well, but then also to the point that you said before is she does all these things, and what McMurphy goes and he's like, "Can you turn down the music?" And she's like, "Well, I keep this music on because there's some people here who are hard of hearing." And she honestly, for a big chunk of that movie, really truly feels like she is somebody who has everyone's best interest at heart.
Absolutely. And that kind of moment is one of the moments that made me think of teaching in a classroom setting where it's like, don't argue with that kid. Do not take the bait.
Yeah.
The kid is going to ask you, well, why this? And you're going to say, well, this reason. And he's going to argue about it made me think of that.
Gotta shut it down.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and she does that in a couple situations too, right?
Yeah.
Where he doesn't want to take the medication. She's like, well, there's another way we can do this.
Yeah.
I don't know if you'd like it, but
Yeah. And
yeah.
then, as kind of a side note, while watching this movie on the topic of the record player, the music, have either of you seen The Shawshank Redemption?
Absolutely.
Yeah. it's
There's
hard-
some real strong parallels
Yeah.
with the Shawshank Redemption in this movie.
There are, although I think that one big difference is that Andy Dufresne is a much more sympathetic character than McMurphy.
Totally.
But yeah, just when you think about institutionalization, defining scenes with record players, with music over the loudspeakers, and I had to think, that first scene where you see the head psychiatrist. Maybe it's just the way his face looks. I immediately thought of the warden from The Shawshank Redemption.
Yeah, he kind of does have something in his eyes.
Those massive eyebrows.
Yeah, the eyebrows too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Speaking
man.
of eyebrows, I mean, Jack Nicholson's, no one else has eyebrows that look like that.
I know, totally. I mean,
Yeah.
speaking of Jack Nicholson too, I mean, this kind of feels like the role that defined him for the rest of his career
Totally.
going
Kind of.
forwards. And he had shown aspects of this character, I think, previously. In Easy Rider, he's kind of this throw caution to the wind kind of guy who, says goodbye to a very comfortable life to go hang out with Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda on the back of motorcycles. 5 Easy Pieces, he is like a pretty emotional dude, but also prone to outbursts.
Carnal knowledge.
And carnal knowledge is another
Yeah.
one where it's like he's a terrible friend in that movie.
Mhm.
Holy cow, he's like the worst friend ever. And also a horrible boyfriend in that movie. Like,
Yeah.
And then, the last detail also being a movie where, he's tasked with taking a derelict, I think, naval officer. I can't remember. I could be wrong about the details, but basically it's him and another officer have to take this guy to a prison for a very small infraction, but the Navy threw the book at him. It's about a lot of things, but one of the final sort of threads is that he becomes disillusioned by the Navy because he sees the humanity in this young person who made a mistake. In that movie, too, he also is showing you this distrust with larger institutions, the kind of things that I think set the plate very nicely for a character like McMurphy. But when I think of the Jack Nicholson that we know now, it's like the flower really blooms in this movie.
Yeah, this
brings it all together.
It's like what Michael Corleone is for Al Pacino. This is that role for
Totally.
Jack Nicholson. Like you can see everything in Al Pacino's future in Michael Corleone.
Yeah.
Or much of it, maybe. It's kind of escalates from there in his case. You don't quite see Tony Montana, but you see the beginning of the journey, and I think it's the same with Jack Nicholson here.
Absolutely.
I think this may be the best place for me to tell my all-time favorite Jack Nicholson story, which is, are you guys aware that he had this kind of period early on where he had kind of given up on acting and assumed he was just going to be a screenwriter?
Oh no!
And
I know that he worked with Bob Raffleson on the Monkees movie.
Yes, he worked with Bob Raffleson, who directs Five Easy Pieces, before Five Easy Pieces on the Monkees movie Head. So Jack Nicholson is a co-writer on the Monkees movie, first of all.
Yeah.
That's fun fact. But going on, there's this crazy story of during the promotion for this movie, like the day of the premiere, Raffleson and Nicholson are in New York, kind of walking around Manhattan, putting up like stickers on telephone poles to advertise the movie, and they encounter a cop and they think, wouldn't it be real funny if we put one of these stickers on the back of that cop's helmet? And so
because the movie's called Head.
Yeah. So I think it's Nicholson that kind of tries to sneak up behind him to like sticker this guy's helmet. And the cop turns around at the last second and Jack Nicholson stickers right onto this guy's face. And he and Bob Raffleson are arrested the day of the premiere for Head. And that's like my favorite story.
That's pretty great. I mean, yeah.
And imagine being this cop and like, I feel like you're always going to remember the face of the guy that like put a sticker right onto your face.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And
you're
that
right.
guy's going to win a Best Actor Oscar like 7 years later.
Yeah. But I mean, this movie, I think, really launches Jack Nicholson from a place of being a counterculture leading man in a movie to a real institution in Hollywood. I know he started producing a lot more after this, and I think just kind of became like an A-list celebrity.
Yeah, I mean, I think you see quite a bit of Jack Torrance in Randle McMurphy, and then speaking of The Shining, I mean, you also have Scatman Crothers as the night guard in this institution in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, foreshadowing their pairing in The Shining. And then at that, apparently Shelley Duvall was considered for the role of Candy.
I heard that
too.
Yeah.
Can I say something really quick that
Yes.
hit me? It was super funky and kind of weird.
Yeah.
I found it to be really funny that it would not be the last time that Scatman Crothers was going to have to deal with a unruly and possibly insane version of Jack Nicholson threatening and taking over a large building that he's being asked to safeguard.
Yeah.
Very specific.
Yeah, very specific circumstances.
Make that a letterbox list.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scatman Crothers is
defends large building from Jack Nicholson.
there you go.
Yeah,
Beautiful. I
all
love
of the
it.
2 movies that end up on it.
But the other thing that I thought was really funny is that, and this gets into, I guess, some of the other kind of themes in the movie, is that both The Shining and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I think they both have undercurrents about the genocide of Native Americans in them. The Overlook Hotel, the setting of The Shining, is said to have been built on a Native American burial ground, which is kind of like a reflection of the the violence and the hubris of white settlers in the United States, Manifest Destiny, kind of all that stuff. And, the sound design of the movie and the presence of Native American art and imagery throughout the hotel really strongly suggests that, the supernatural elements of The Shining possibly have their roots in something like that, right? And then in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, the chief character, after he outs himself to Jack Nicholson as not being a deaf mute, right? And Jack Nicholson sort of gets the second wind, knowing that there's this other guy there that he's kind of more on the level with. But the chief talks about how his father, I'm going to kind of more or less paraphrase here, and I might have interpreted it wrong, but was talking about how his dad was driven to like alcoholism that eventually led to his death. And I don't know exactly what it is. They don't really name it, but I think that what they're going for here is that he was really driven to this by a system that was like misleading him and undermining him, so much that it kind of drove him to madness. And I have to imagine that was like the American government.
Yeah.
It was like, in Native American communities, alcoholism is an enormous problem and has been for decades. I might even go so far as to say centuries. And so, and that was one of the inciting incidences for Chief. He's so strongly affected by the fact that this happens that he develops schizophrenia and eventually kind of withdraws so much that he chooses to spend his days in the institution like pretending to be a deaf mute, And so, I don't know. I thought it was really interesting that both movies kind of placed Jack Nicholson and his characters at the center of a story where the mistreatment and marginalization of Native American people and their culture indirectly sort of drives the narrative, and ultimately ends up overpowering him.
It's true.
Both movies.
Yeah, that at the end of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, I mean, it really is Chief who achieves the thing that McMurphy wants.
Yeah.
But that McMurphy really, his deeds end up sinking him so deep into the system that he can't escape.
Yeah.
With the lobotomy that he gets, I mean, he's not dead at that point, but he might as well be.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, Chief puts him out of his misery. You get the sense that Chief is doing that. Initially he's sorrowful. It seems that he really misses McMurphy, but then he's kind of resentful too. He was kind of like, you were my ticket out of here.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think he even says to his lobotomized body that he's like, I'm not going to leave you here in this state. Right? Or something to that effect.
It's essentially like, this is no way for you to live.
Yeah.
I mean, Chief and Mac, their relationship is I think, emotional core of the movie, and is really the only time that I really like Mac is any time he's interacting with Chief.
Me too. Me too. The Chief aspect of this movie was actually the thing that I was really drawn to this time around. And the kind of, I guess, allegorical or the symbolism of him sort of being, somebody who was like the victim of a culture or a society that was looking to sort of oppress and hold him down in much the same way that the mental institution does, that the United States has very much done for the Native American community. That was a parallel I found really strong. And to your point, I feel like that is where the Jack Nicholson character, he really comes alive with him.
Absolutely, because the scene towards the beginning where Mac is first trying to show Chief how to dunk a basketball is probably the first time that Chief has been treated as a human and not a piece of furniture, since the entire time he's been in this institution. Because even, I forget which of the guards it is that's essentially telling Mac, why are you even talking to him? Don't even bother. And Mac pushes back, and he's like, well, I'm not talking to him. I'm talking to myself. It's not hurting him for me to talk to him. I
was reading a little bit about the actor who played him, Will Sampson, that, this was a breakout performance for him. This, I think, was his first movie role, and that he was a rodeo performer before that, when he was discovered by Michael Douglas and Saul Zaentz. And one of a number of people in the movie who has these careers that are, not ultimately very long, but, turn out some really great work in them. But where One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is kind of the central movie.
Yeah. I think that's a great time to start talking about the other inmates and the supporting cast of the movie.
Now, the one who really stood out for me this time, who I didn't remember so much from my first viewing was Brad Dourif as Billy Bibbit.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's really great.
There's a couple people who might be tied for most sympathetic character in this movie, but he's certainly one of them.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the emotional swing in the movie has to do with how much we feel for the Billy Bibbit character. If he's a total jerk, we are not going to be sold on what happens in the last 20 minutes of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And kind of right before that moment happens, when kind of after they've thrown their little party, but before they are busted, it's at this point, Mac is going to leave. Like he and I think Chief are like, all right, we're out of here. And they're kind of saying their goodbyes. And it felt kind of Wizard of Oz to me in some ways, with their goodbyes. And I'm like, Billy's the scarecrow. Like Billy's the one, like, and I'll miss you the most.
Really interesting. I like that.
Yeah. But Brad Dourif, the first place that I knew him from, fitting for my generation, was from Lord of the Rings as Wormtongue, the very aptly named character. And I think it's really just in the Two Towers where he has a prominent role. But it's so different. It's, the complete opposite of Billy Bibbit. Because Wormtongue, the name says enough. He really is this like sniveling evil character. But then I also, Brad Dourif, I think he's mostly known as a character actor. Apparently he's the voice of Chucky in Child's Play.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say.
Yeah, I've never seen, actually.
Oh, man.
But then,
no. And he's been the voice of Chucky, I think, right up until very recently.
And he has a small part in Blue Velvet, too. He's one of Dennis Hopper's character's goons in that movie.
I read that, and I couldn't place him in the movie, but it's been a while since I've seen Blue Velvet.
Only really during the sequence where they go to that sort of club that Frank Booth, Dennis Hopper's character, is like a partial owner of, and you see Dean Stockwell as Ben doing his little In Dreams dance. I think it's in that sequence.
Okay. What year is Blue Velvet?
1986.
That's so interesting to me that like at this point, Brad Dourif has been nominated for an Oscar, and a decade later he's like playing such a minor character in some of these movies.
Yeah.
I actually don't remember his name, but the gentleman who plays Harding,
William Redfield.
Thank you. Yeah. I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah.
He's very good in this.
And I don't totally know him from other things besides this movie, but
he has one of the sadder stories of the actors in this movie, because he apparently on the set of the movie was diagnosed with leukemia. Or more specifically, that he was diagnosed on the set. A doctor had noticed he was exhibiting symptoms, and he died the following year, 1976.
Okay.
And he wasn't old too; he was 49.
Wow.
Yeah.
That character was really interesting for me. And
agree.
before we finish, I have a slight thing I want to bring up about the Harding character.
Sure.
But so there's Brad Dourif. We already talked about Danny DeVito. We'd be remiss to not mention Christopher Lloyd.
Oh,
Christopher Lloyd, first of all, this is his debut, which is crazy.
It's funny, though, because his energy, you can totally see Doc Brown.
You can see it for sure. There are certain shots where you're like, yep, no, he does that face as Doc. And it's so Christopher Lloyd I find so interesting in general because they age him up so much in Back to the Future. And I think that's particularly apparent when you watch this movie where he looks the age that he actually is at the time. Like he looks fairly young.
Do you guys know what year he was born?
1938.
Oh, I was just going to ask. I was like, real quick, before anybody can look it up, what year we think he was born. Because he's one of those guys who's been 50 years old for 40 years.
Yeah, it's like he was in his 30s in this movie. And he looks good for it. But then it's like jump ahead just 10 years to Back to the Future. And they style him like he's 65 years old.
I know.
Close to that time. Marlon Brando was only 48 when he played Don Corleone.
Sure.
Yeah, but he looks like he's 70 there.
Yeah. He kind of had like the Elvis aging thing, though.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it got rough for him.
Yeah.
By that time.
But then, Christopher Lloyd is another Taxi connection too. He was on Taxi.
That's right.
Actually, I think right from the beginning.
Yeah.
Right there with Danny DeVito and Andy Kaufman.
Yeah, totally. And then I think I mentioned Vincent Schiavelli in there too. But man, such a presence. The face is
Mhm.
his face is just burned into my brain
Yeah.
as the subway ghost in the movie Ghost. If you
Haven't seen that.
I've seen Ghost, but it's been a long time.
Yeah, he plays the ghost that teaches Patrick Swayze how to affect the real world.
Yes,
and
of course.
he doesn't have a whole lot to do in this movie, but
Mhm.
he I think went on to have a pretty prolific character actor career.
And became a recurring player for Milos Forman specifically too.
Mhm.
Oh, really?
Yeah, according to his resume, he's in like Amadeus, Man on the Moon.
Oh, right. He is in
Yeah.
Amadeus. Yes, he is. Yeah, I forgot.
While we're on the topic of the supporting cast, we've said nothing yet about Cheswick, the character.
I love Cheswick.
I do too.
I want to give Cheswick a hug.
Same, yeah. It was like the one character, like, there's a few people who I think are tied for most sympathetic. Ultimately, I felt similarly sympathetic to Bibbit, but there were more moments where with Cheswick, I was just like, oh, come on, I want to give this guy a hug.
Yeah, I want to take good care of him. I love the moment when they're on the boat and he starts singing the Popeye theme
Yeah.
song.
yeah, that's great.
While we're on, like, mentioning the boat too, I mean, we were saying that like Danny DeVito as Martini, I mean, that character doesn't get a whole lot to do. He is kind of like a constant among a lot of the other characters, but I found it funny that on the boat scene that, as McMurphy walks off with Candy, clearly they're both about to have sex. Martini is the one who kind of like sees what they're doing. He's the peeper. Yeah. He goes around to the front and he's like, ooh, let's see what they're doing.
Yeah, totally.
But, we were saying that you can't see a lot of future Danny DeVito in this role, but in that moment, I think you can.
Maybe a little bit. I also love in that scene, McMurphy's trying to convince the guy that they have actually chartered the boat, and he tells them that, we're from the mental institution. Everybody here's a doctor,
Except
him.
Harding.
Yeah,
Harding.
Except Harding.
He calls him Mr. Harding.
Oh,
and you see
right,
him
right,
shoot
right.
him a glance of disdain.
Oh,
He's the only one that's not
right.
introduced as doctor.
Right,
Yeah.
that's true. But I love it how everybody in that scene who's introduced as a doctor suddenly turns and goes
Totally.
and kind of assumes this
Yeah.
role of like, absolutely, I'm to be, showered
Like,
with praise.
I've been assigned this role.
Exactly, and I'm going to act accordingly.
I actually think that this movie does a great job of humanizing every one of its characters.
It does. It
Yeah.
does. It works very hard to. Absolutely.
And for that time, I mean, that has to be a very progressive thing,
Mm-hmm.
especially, characters like Cheswick and Bibbit, who you really feel like these are some pretty innocent guys, who have some problems for sure, but you really get the sense that the system is not designed to help them in a real way.
And we find out that the majority of these men are here voluntarily.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think the underlying theme of that is that society kind of tells you what's crazy and what's healthy. And
Exactly.
society presents it as very black and white. And if you don't have like complete control over your mental and emotional state 100% of the time, then like you don't belong.
Yeah, and then maybe it's better to stay there and keep
Yeah.
yourself
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, even when, Mac is kind of trying to convince Billy, like, you should just leave. Like, why are you here? And Billy's like, I'm not ready.
Mhm.
And most of them say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this actually brings me to the point that I wanted to bring up about Harding. Early on, I talked about how I wasn't totally sure if the Jack Nicholson character was maybe the best vessel for this kind of message. And I was thinking about how different a movie it might be if it was Harding who has like an awakening. And it really comes down to that point about him being institutionalized on his own free will.
Mhm.
That detail makes the kind of societal point that you're making right now, I think, a little more interesting, because the Jack Nicholson character is one of the only people there that's committed.
And he
so
starts by trying to game the system.
Exactly. And he doesn't have a choice in the matter, but the other people there do. And I don't know why I chose Harding specifically as the person that I placed this on, but I thought how interesting the movie might have been if it was his character that suddenly has a realization that he's actually okay and that he'd love to kind of find his way out of this, but there was a nurse there that was making life really difficult for him and was convincing him that maybe he wasn't really ready to do that. I don't know. Maybe I would have been more on board with the message if the movie sort of took that direction.
And maybe part of the reason you're drawn to Harding for this specifically is that we see a lot of the other patients, Billy and Cheswick, like have some sort of breakdown at some point. And we never, to my memory, see that with Harding. Anytime we ever see him, like he can get a little like tense and frustrated, but we never really see him have any sort of like quote unquote episode. Like he seems pretty stable.
Yeah, I guess comparatively stable.
Yeah, comparatively.
Yeah, no, you know what? You're probably right. I think maybe that's why he comes to mind as maybe the best candidate.
Wife.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And that he has the best candidate, or is the best candidate for some kind of a realization that maybe I don't need to be here. Anyway, that was just my own kind of harebrained idea.
One aspect of the many interesting things about this movie, one thing that stood out to me early on in the movie was actually the costume design. And this goes back to Harding, because in that first group therapy scene, everyone is just in pure white except for McMurphy and Harding.
Exactly. Yeah. I thought, remember the same thing. He's in like plaid, like
over those whites, but
but he's in like a plaid shirt, and there's a little bit more individuality placed, I think, on their wardrobe. Right.
And it varies over the course of the movie. There are points where McMurphy is in more of that conventional institutional garb, but then towards the end, before he is lobotomized, he is kind of, he kind of looks the same way that he did coming in.
Yeah, he's in like his little beanie and his leather jacket, almost as if he just has that stuff in a locker and he just like throw it on whenever he's ready to escape.
Yeah, I think he's definitely more anti-hero than hero. And I think like one of the points that stood out to me throughout the movie, not just in the conclusion, is that I feel like there is this tension between him and the system in that neither is really in the right. Yes, there are many problematic things about the way that this institution is being run, but there's many problematic things about him too. It comes into focus at numerous points throughout the movie, and I think that the conclusion of him being lobotomized, I feel like it's an indictment of both the greater system that he's held within and kind of him himself. And in a sense, even though you feel like he feels like he's doing something nice for Bibbit towards the conclusion of the movie, I think you really feel that like, well, Bibbit is taking the bait. That what McMurphy's doing is not inherently a good thing for him. He's kind of just manipulating him.
Yeah, I guess maybe manipulating, but also just trying to sort of impose what he thinks is a good time.
Exactly.
On this kid.
Yeah. And so in a way, like, or more than in a way, McMurphy is responsible for Bibbit's downfall.
Yeah, and I think that's also, it points to the complicated nature of his character.
Right.
That, when he acts out the way that he does against the Nurse Ratched character, that it's kind of something he brought on maybe in some ways himself.
Because he kind of seems to think that he, throughout like all the mischief that he's getting them into, that they're not going to face any consequences because they're, quote unquote crazy. Like when at one point, I forget, maybe it's Candy when they're on the boat, that's like, what are they're going to come after you. And he's like, what are they going to do?
Just send us back.
Yeah, they're just going to send us back. Like, we're nuts.
The one scene where I really did kind of feel for McMurphy, though, not very surprisingly, was the electroshock therapy scene.
Oh, yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah.
And I also think it's such an interesting choice from a directorial perspective to have that be a pretty quiet scene.
Yeah.
And it's not like a big scene with like a lot of screaming. Like the agony you see on his face is like enough to, get the point across.
Sure.
Yes.
And also the room is filled with people.
Yeah.
That's the other thing that's always a little creepy about that scene, is it sort of seems like he's really a guinea pig. They bring him in there under the auspices of that they're going to watch him and monitor him. And in that moment, you really feel like everyone's presence descending on him.
I have a question. Is the implication that they also do this to Cheswick?
I think so.
Like he like goes into this room kicking and screaming, like because he knows what's happening.
Yeah.
In a way that Mac, this is his first rodeo.
Right.
Yeah.
I also think it's really very intentional that it's right before that moment that he discovers that Chief is not a deaf mute. And that really puts some wind in his sails to come out of that situation and be like, you guys have not broken my spirit, right? Because he like walks in pretending to be the zombie and he's like, I gotcha.
But even at the end of that scene, you see like a little like twitch that feels involuntary, I think, as a character.
Sure.
I had the thought, like bringing Chief back into the picture, that at the end of the movie when, all the other inmates see the broken window, I think they assume it's McMurphy who's broken free.
Because there are those rumors already floating around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that, Chief, he leaves, objectively loudly, but in a way quietly too.
Right.
Even though he's like in the process, he's basically lifted up this Thor hammer, sink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pulls
I don't know
it
what
out
that
of
is,
the
by
plumbing.
Yeah.
What was that, by the way? It's a sink, but it's also shoots water. I couldn't tell what that really
It
is.
seemed kind of like a mixed, maybe it's like something to shower someone from a distance.
He
Yeah.
lifts up the sink again right out of its plumbing. And
Yeah.
I mean, you were saying that they probably think that it's Mac who's escaped.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, you as the viewer know the secret of his character, but the others don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, I keep feeling like there's some message to him being the one who escapes that I feel like I'm still trying to pin down aspects of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are signs in the film about him being the narrator of the book, and I think the fact that he is the one to escape comes from the origin of that being that he's the narrator of the book.
Yeah.
I think at this time too in culture, Native Americans were sort of used as a shorthand for some like pure version of America,
Yeah.
of this country. And so him kind of rising out of this situation also sort of seems to be a symbol of like a pure version of ourselves being able to escape being subjugated, right? Or of losing our individuality or being told what it is that we're supposed to do all the time.
Yeah, it's a mixed bag of a symbol because there's definitely some, reductive cultural stereotyping going into that.
The music that they put over when he is like mercy killing Mac, I found very unsettling.
Yeah, well, I can't
did
remember.
It have
offhand.
sort of like a like a chain kind of sound or something?
Like kind of a
Or
shaker.
like a shaker, yeah.
And like a
I think I know what you're talking
flute.
about.
I wasn't a huge fan of this music choice at this particular moment.
I hate to say it, but I mean, I think it is also a product of its time.
Yeah.
It is kind of sloppy or maybe lazy shorthand to ascribe some kind of American identity that is lacking of original sin, maybe on a character like the Chief, but I can't help but feel that it's there, that they're kind of going for that there's a purity of spirit that he is supposed to represent.
There's probably ample commentary that can be offered. I haven't read the book, but for people commenting on the book about Ken Kesey, a white author, assuming the narration of an indigenous character. I mean, that's I'm sure a complicated literary gesture.
So have you guys ever heard of a book called The Education of Little Tree?
No.
Yes, but I've not read it.
Okay. You guys and anybody who's listening needs to look up The Education of Little Tree and its origins. And that book came out right around the time of this movie. And I do think that there is a parallel there. Fascinating history behind this book. I'm going to leave it there.
As a broader point about just the adaptation itself, I think this is one of very few pieces of beat literature that really have been adapted to film.
I have not really read pretty much anything from the kind of beat generation.
Same.
So
yeah, I think it's influenced a lot that I have taken in both in literature and in film. But yeah, like kind of the proper beat stuff itself. Yeah, that's a blind spot for me.
Yeah. How would we rate a movie like this now after we've kind of talked about it and revisited it? How do we feel?
I think right now my feeling is kind of like in the 8.5, 9 zone out of 10. Because I still think it's a really great movie. It has a lot that keeps it very interesting. I think, the dialogue, acting, a lot of the relationships of the characters are really fascinating to ponder as a viewer. I think that some things are shallow, but then there are redemptive qualities even when there are kind of shallow things too. In the film context of its time, it really is an advancement. For whatever things are dated about it, I think it still holds up reasonably well. And it's a movie that I think does not really spoon feed the viewer a lot. I think it's a good viewer engagement movie. It really makes you ask some complicated questions.
Sure. How about you, Madeline?
I think I'm gonna go with like an 8, but I find rating this movie kind of difficult because the thing that I love about this movie are just, I think it has such great performances. I think Jack Nicholson is so good in this. You get a couple of like really long held close-ups that I'm just like, man, no one can hold a close-up like Nicholson. Like, I just think he is so good in this, even if I find Mac to be a pretty unsympathetic character.
Sure.
I still find him like really engaging to watch. I think it's interestingly paced as a film. Like, I think the boat hijack is such a nice like reprieve in the middle of what could otherwise be a pretty emotionally draining film.
Sure. I think that was very well placed because I feel like you need a moment like that away from the confines.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the things that like we've already kind of digged into that make me not like fully on board with this movie, a lot of it has to do with Nurse Ratched. I think she's very well portrayed, but and perhaps her being such a complicated character, maybe it can add to the film overall. But like as kind of you were alluding to, really, I had trouble buying her as an antagonist through much of the film. And I'm like, in certain ways, I sympathize with her, like having to sort of exert power and authority over a group of mentally unwell men at, a very tumultuous time for women. So,
I mean, one last little detail, maybe as an interpretation from the book, but that at the end of the movie, when Jack Nicholson almost strangles her to death, that he's lobotomized, but she's also semi like mortally wounded. She loses her voice in a really profound way.
You see her in a neck brace, and I was curious as to how long after, like how big of a time jump this is.
I agree. I think in the book, her voice is meant to be sort of permanently damaged, and symbolically, that's supposed to take away some of her power. That is not really represented in the movie, and in fact, I feel like that little clip that you see of her, she seems happy to be there.
Yeah.
She actually has a smile on her face in a way that you never see at any other point in the movie.
And if you're looking at it from more of a cynical viewpoint, I'm sure you could be like, well, she's won.
I guess.
But I don't personally feel that way.
I don't personally feel that way either. Yeah. And again, all of the things that I think make her performance very interesting and full of nuance make it really hard for me also to sort of buy in, I think, on the popular perception of this movie. Top 100 villain. I don't see her that way at all.
Yeah.
I know that is a lot of how this movie has lived on, is in this sort of mano-y-mano kind of relationship that the Jack Nicholson and Louise Fletcher characters have.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, me too. I like this movie a little bit more upon having seen it again, but I think some of the issues that I initially had with it actually kind of deepened a bit. I've already made a bunch of them, I think, pretty clear, which is I don't totally buy the Jack Nicholson character. As you say, he is very compelling. He's super charismatic on screen, but I don't really buy him as this sort of vessel to sort of bring along individuality amongst everybody there. And I don't really understand the adversarial relationship that exists between them. So I think I would put this kind of more at like a 7. I think there are, like you said, Julian, there are a lot of really wonderful qualities to this movie, I think. I think it's a really fascinating movie to talk about. Like, I'm having a great time talking about it now.
Yeah.
It's definitely very interesting, and I can't say that about a lot of other movies that I maybe have enjoyed a little more than this one. So I know that for reasons like that, this movie has definitely endured. It's not one of those quote-unquote great films that I totally agree is quote-unquote great.
On that note, let's just, before we wrap up, I want to quickly talk about the 1975 Oscars.
I think that's a good way to end.
And this, where this movie had a sweep, it won the Big Five. It won Best Picture, Best Director, Actor, Actress, and Adapted Screenplay. And only a few other movies have won that in history. It Happened One Night in 1934. That won the Big Five. The Silence of the Lambs in 1991 won that. Almost last year, Everything Everywhere All at Once, that almost got it. It didn't get Best Actor, but it got the other four.
Oh, right.
There's a lot that have gotten four of them, but not all five. And well, just to look only at the Best Picture winners or nominees of that year, I mean, it's an interesting bunch. This year was a tough competition because it's our winner, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, up against Barry Lyndon, Dog Day Afternoon, Jaws, and Nashville.
Yeah.
I have a question for all of you, which is, what would be your Best Picture winner from this list?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Sorry.
And this is tough because I've seen all of these movies, but Jaws I've definitely seen the least recently. But just kind of spur of the moment, I might say Nashville.
I might say Nashville too.
That was going to be my choice as well.
Wow, look at that.
I mean, I love Nashville.
Yeah.
I love Altman. Nashville to me is like the clear winner from this list. I haven't actually seen Dog Day Afternoon myself, but I love that movie. I think it's so interesting. I think it's so well done. So absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a case to be made about a lot of these movies. I mean, I would say that from a pop culture perspective, I think Jaws is definitely the maybe most enduring and most influential of those movies.
I'd say that's true.
And to be honest, from a technical perspective and from a storytelling and acting perspective, it's honestly right there amongst all the other ones.
Totally.
I think Jaws is an absolute masterpiece. Stone cold classic. I think it is. I think it's up there with some of the very best movies ever made. But I think when we think about Best Picture, I kind of agree. I feel like Nashville just has this really fascinating scope and like how it's told, and
the scope is, I think,
characters.
A big part of it. Like it's such a large movie. Like you can just, I mean, certainly in comparison to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which is, as we talked about, like a very like insulated movie.
Contained
they're mostly in the hospital. They only leave like once. You occasionally see them on the basketball court. But Nashville is just like all over the city with all these different characters and like thousands of background actors. And it's like a whole spectacle.
Yeah. And we've talked about probably having a future episode cycle on movies about musicians. And I was thinking that might be a good one for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. We might be revisiting that one.
As a musician, Nashville is a very satisfying movie to watch too.
Totally. Yeah. There's a lot of great music.
Yeah. Where it's just, you not only is there great music, but you see these really full characters portrayed in a musical landscape and in a level of detail that I think is not always portrayed on film.
Pretty cool. I have one last rather silly question, but is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest a Christmas movie?
I asked this question while I was watching it. My partner came in and watched the second half of this movie with me, and when it gets to that scene, I turned to him and I said, "Is this a Christmas movie?" And he said, "Yes."
Okay. I'm going to say yes too. I mean, one of the big climactic things that happens in this movie happens at a Christmas party.
Yeah.
Come on.
I think if Die Hard is a Christmas movie, then
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is too. Yeah.
Even though, funny enough, it was filmed between January and April of 1975.
January is basically Christmas.
Especially in Oregon.
Although it was released the November of that year. So
also Christmas.
Christmas season. Thank you. Madeline, you're making the point here.
People would have seen it Christmas 1975. So, yeah.
So, yes.
Okay, fantastic. And on that note,
yeah. Do we want to say a bit about
Happy
what we're
holidays,
next?
y'all. I mean, I think one of the things that we're hoping to do is to add a little bit of a kind of an overarching theme to the kind of cycle in which we are choosing to engage with these movies. So the next time we get together, we're going to talk about a movie that the three of us have never seen. And continuing on this theme of maybe questioning sanity amongst characters in the film, we're going to talk about Todd Haynes' Safe.
From 1995, starring Julian Moore. We've never seen this, but soon we will.
Yep, and we'll have some opinions. Awesome. Well, guys, this has been a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
You as well.
Until next time.